If you think a woman feels your absence as heartbreak, you've already misunderstood her psychology. What she feels first is something far more dangerous. Quiet imbalance she can't explain. When you're no longer there, the initial sensation isn't longing, it's disorientation. Your presence wasn't just emotional, it was regulatory. You were a stabilizing variable in her internal world. When that variable disappears, her emotional system doesn't collapse. It recalibrates, and recalibration is uncomfortable because it exposes things she didn't know she was relying on. She notices it in small, unsettling ways. Her mood fluctuates without a clear cause. Her patience shortens. Her energy shifts depending on the room she's in. She becomes more reactive to attention, not because she wants validation, but because her emotional baseline has been disturbed. You were part of the rhythm that kept her centered. Now the rhythm is off. Here's the truth: most men never hear. A woman doesn't immediately miss you. She misses the internal state she experienced around you. How grounded she felt, how regulated her emotions were, how her identity subtly organized itself in your presence. When that internal structure weakens, she becomes aware of the absence, not emotionally, but psychologically. This is why her behavior after you're gone often confuses men. She may seem fine, even better than before, more social, more expressive, more visible. But this isn't indifference, it's compensation. When something stabilizing disappears, the mind seeks replacement stimuli. Attention, noise, distraction. These are tools, not feelings. And here's the part that matters most. Your absence forces her to sit with herself. No mirror, no emotional anchor, no familiar masculine polarity to react against. That's when her mind turns inward. She begins asking questions she never asked when you were present. Not "do I miss him?" but "why do I feel different without him?" That question carries far more weight. Men assume women process absence emotionally the way men do through pain, nostalgia, and regret. But women process absence through awareness. They feel the shift in their emotional environment before they attach meaning to it. And awareness precedes attachment, not the other way around. If you were weak, inconsistent, or emotionally chaotic, your absence brings relief. But if you were calm, grounded, and self-contained, your absence creates contrast. And contrast is psychologically loud. It magnifies what was previously subtle. Your steadiness becomes noticeable only when it's gone. This is why chasing her during absence backfires. Texting, explaining, seeking reassurance. Trying to stay emotionally present while physically absent destroys the recalibration process. It removes the silence. And silence is what forces her mind to notice the difference. She may tell herself she's fine. She may convince herself she doesn't care. But the nervous system doesn't lie. If her emotional state feels less stable, her mind will eventually search for the cause. And when it does, it won't ask what she lost. It will ask who made her feel more like herself. That's the first reality of your absence. It doesn't scream. It hums quietly inside her until she can no longer ignore it. Once the initial imbalance settles, something far more precise begins to take shape inside her mind. Comparison. Not between you and other men, but between emotional states. How she feels now versus how she felt when you were present. This is where absence turns from background noise into psychological pressure. A woman doesn't remember people accurately. She remembers states. She remembers how her nervous system behaved, how safe or stimulated she felt, how her identity flowed in certain environments. When you're gone, her emotional baseline quietly shifts, and that shift becomes impossible to ignore because every new interaction is measured against it. She goes out, she talks to others, she laughs, she receives attention. But something feels slightly off. The conversations feel louder but thinner. The attention feels abundant but empty. Not bad, just incomplete. And that incompleteness creates contrast. Contrast sharpens memory. This is where men get it wrong. They assume absence makes a woman miss specific moments, texts, jokes, intimacy. But what resurfaces instead is coherence. She remembers how she felt emotionally organized around you, how your presence simplified her internal chaos, how her reactions felt more grounded even when she didn't consciously notice it at the time. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The more emotionally self-contained you were, the stronger this comparison becomes. If you were needy, reactive, or inconsistent, her nervous system learned to brace itself around you. Your absence, then, feels lighter. But if you were steady, if you didn't chase, didn't collapse, didn't require constant validation, your absence removes a quiet pillar she didn't know was holding weight. This comparison doesn't happen consciously at first. She doesn't sit and think about you. She feels dissatisfaction without a clear source. She feels overstimulated, yet underfulfilled. She may label it boredom or restlessness or just a phase, but the body knows before the mind admits anything. And that's when memory begins to distort in your favor. Not because she's lying to herself, but because the brain prioritizes emotional contrast over factual detail. Your mistakes fade faster than your stability. Your silence becomes more powerful than your words ever were. Your emotional containment becomes more visible now that it's gone. This is also why women often reach out randomly after a period of absence. Not because they miss you in the romantic sense, but because the comparison has reached a threshold. The nervous system seeks what previously regulated it. The message isn't nostalgia, it's recalibration. She may not even know why she's thinking of you. She just knows that something felt more aligned before, more centered, more real. And alignment is addictive once noticed. But here's where most men sabotage everything. They respond emotionally instead of structurally. They over-explain. They seek clarity. They try to restart connection from a place of need, and in doing so, they destroy the very contrast that brought her awareness back to them. Because what she's responding to isn't longing. It's difference. The difference between emotional chaos and emotional coherence, between noise and calm, between stimulation and grounding. If you hold your frame during absence, if you don't rush to fill silence with reassurance, you allow the comparison to deepen. And deep comparison reshapes desire far more effectively than pursuit ever could. This is the second truth. She doesn't miss you because you're gone. She notices you because everything else feels slightly less aligned without you. After comparison comes something even quieter and far more powerful: internal attribution. This is the moment her mind stops asking what feels different and starts asking why. And this is where your absence either dissolves or imprints itself deeply. A woman's psychology is meaning-driven. She cannot sit with emotional shifts for long without assigning a cause. At first, she blames her mood, then circumstances, then stress. But eventually, the pattern becomes too consistent to ignore. The same emotional dullness, the same lack of grounding, the same restless pull she can't explain. And when patterns repeat, the mind searches backward. This is when you re-enter not as a memory, but as an explanation. She begins to notice that the version of herself she misses existed during a specific time frame, a time when you were present but not invasive, steady but not controlling, available but not dependent. That version of herself felt more emotionally contained, more coherent, less scattered. And once the mind links that internal state to your presence, the bond shifts from emotional to psychological. This is where attachment quietly forms or reforms. Understand this clearly. Attachment doesn't come from pleasure. It comes from regulation. The person who helps stabilize your internal world becomes psychologically significant whether you like it or not. When that stabilizer disappears, the mind doesn't crave romance. It craves balance. This is why her thoughts about you feel strange to her. They don't feel emotional. They feel intrusive. You surface in her mind during unrelated moments, during calm, not sadness, during silence, not longing. And that confuses her because she can't label it as missing you without admitting dependence. So she resists the thought, she distracts herself, she rationalizes. But resistance is friction, and friction creates focus. Meanwhile, something important is happening beneath the surface. Her perception of you is changing. When you were present, you were part of the environment. Now you are a reference point, and reference points gain power with distance. You become symbolic, not of love, but of emotional alignment. This is also when respect grows or dies permanently. If during your absence you remained self-contained, didn't chase, didn't demand clarity, didn't seek reassurance, you reinforced the very trait that made her feel regulated. Your silence confirms your stability, and stability is magnetic because it feels scarce. But if you broke absence, if you leaked emotion, sought validation, or tried to force connection, you inverted the attribution. Instead of being the source of grounding, you became the source of pressure. And pressure never gets missed. It gets escaped. Here's the part most men don't realize. Women don't attach to men who want them. They attach to men who orient them. Men whose presence organizes their emotional experience. Men who don't need to be reacted to because they already are. By now, she's not thinking about you as a person. She's thinking about the absence of a feeling, a subtle but persistent lack of emotional coherence. And the mind hates unresolved gaps. It will always seek to close them. This is when curiosity appears. Not desire, not nostalgia, curiosity. And curiosity is dangerous because it pulls without urgency. It invites without force. It draws her toward you internally before she ever acts externally. This is the third truth. Your absence becomes meaningful only when her mind decides you were the reason something inside her felt more stable. And once the mind assigns that meaning, it doesn't let go easily. Once meaning is assigned, something shifts inside her that she rarely talks about. Vulnerability without confession. This is the phase where she feels pulled toward you but refuses to admit it, even to herself. Not because she's dishonest, but because acknowledging it would challenge her sense of emotional independence. At this point, her mind isn't replaying memories. It's rehearsing scenarios, small, almost unconscious ones. What it would feel like to hear your voice again, how a conversation might flow, whether your energy would still feel the same. These aren't fantasies. They're tests. Her psyche is checking if the emotional alignment she associated with you still exists. And here's the key. She doesn't want you back emotionally yet. She wants confirmation. Confirmation that the grounding she felt wasn't situational, that it came from you, not the moment. That's why her behavior becomes inconsistent. She may view your stories but not respond, like a post but not reach out. Ask about you through mutual connections without revealing her interest. This push-pull isn't manipulation, it's risk assessment. Emotional regulation creates attachment, but attachment creates exposure, and exposure threatens control. So she hovers at the edge, gathering information while protecting her autonomy. If you remain unchanged, calm, self-contained, unreactive, you pass the test without knowing it. Your stability signals safety without pursuit. It tells her that the emotional alignment she remembers wasn't an illusion, that it wasn't dependent on her behavior, that it existed independently of her validation. But if you show agitation, neediness, or emotional leakage, the test fails instantly. Her nervous system registers instability. The meaning she assigned to your absence collapses, and once meaning collapses, attraction doesn't fade. It shuts down. This is why timing matters less than state. You could say the right words at the wrong emotional frequency and undo months of psychological pull. Women don't respond to logic in this phase. They respond to consistency, to emotional tone, to the feeling that nothing needs to be fixed. During this stage, she may convince herself she's over you. She may even date someone else. But watch closely. She compares internally, not consciously, but somatically, how her body feels around them versus how it felt around you. How regulated her emotions are, how much effort it takes to feel centered. And if the difference is clear, the pull intensifies. This is when the idea of reconnection stops feeling risky and starts feeling inevitable, not urgent, but unresolved, like a sentence that ended too early. She doesn't want to reopen the story. She wants to complete it, but completion only happens if you don't reach for it. The strongest position you can hold here is neutrality. Not coldness, not distance. Neutrality. You don't chase the outcome, because the outcome is already forming internally. You don't demand clarity because clarity is emerging without words. This is the phase where most men lose everything by trying to secure what hasn't yet surfaced. They push for answers, they confess, they ask where they stand, and in doing so, they shift the emotional weight onto her, forcing a decision before her psyche is ready. And when forced, she chooses safety, not alignment. This is the fourth truth. Before a woman returns emotionally, she must first feel safe admitting vulnerability internally. Your steadiness, not your effort, is what allows that to happen. At the final stage, something resolves inside her. Not emotionally, but decisively. This is where your absence stops being a question and becomes an answer. By now, her mind has tested every alternative: distraction, attention, replacement, rationalization, and none of it recreated the internal alignment she associated with you. That's when clarity arrives. Not dramatically, but quietly. She realizes something she never wanted to admit. Your presence didn't just affect how she felt about you. It affected how she felt about herself. More grounded, more centered, less reactive, less scattered. And once that realization settles, it can't be undone by logic or pride. This is where men often misinterpret the moment. They expect grand gestures, emotional confessions, obvious longing. But what actually appears is subtle courage, a message that feels casual, a question that seems unnecessary, a moment of openness disguised as coincidence, not because she's playing games, but because vulnerability feels safer when it wears a mask. If she reaches out, it's not to relive the past, it's to check the present, to see if the emotional frequency she remembers still exists, if your energy still feels grounded, if your presence still organizes her inner world instead of demanding from it. And this is where everything is decided. If you respond from a place of calm self-sufficiency, without resentment, without eagerness, without emotional debt, you confirm what her nervous system has already concluded, that the stability she felt wasn't temporary, that it wasn't dependent on control or proximity, that it came from who you are. But if you collapse into emotion, seek reassurance, or try to reclaim certainty, you break the spell instantly. Because the thing she was drawn back to wasn't affection. It was orientation. The feeling that around you, things made sense. Here's the deepest truth. A woman doesn't return because she misses a man. She returns because she misses how she functioned internally when he was part of her emotional environment. And that kind of pull doesn't respond to persuasion, it responds to presence. Even if she never reaches out, the impact remains. You become a reference point, a silent comparison she carries forward. Every man after you is measured against the emotional coherence you provided. Some will be more exciting, some more available, but few will feel as stabilizing. And that absence leaves an imprint far longer than attention ever could. This is the power you were never taught to hold. Not dominance, not mystery, but emotional containment. The ability to be steady enough that your absence creates awareness instead of relief. So, here's the question I want you to answer honestly in the comments. When you step away, do people feel calmer or freer? If this message resonated with you, like the video. Subscribe for deeper truths about relationships and female psychology. and share this with a friend who needs to understand the power of presence before it's too